Welcome, Midnight Army, to the Slumbering Times. Tonight we present Legends of the Three Kingdoms, Six Fates Entwined, drawn from Luo Guanzhong's 14th century Romance of the Three Kingdoms, set amid the Han Dynasty's collapse. Imagine an empire sundered by eunuch, scheming and peasant revolt, fracturing into Wei in the iron north, Shu in the virtuous west, and Wu along the southern rivers. At the heart of this storm stand six avatars of destiny: Diaochan, whose beauty topples tyrants; Liu Bei, the fearsome warrior whose loyalties shift like sand; Cao Cao, the cunning fox who puppeteers emperors; Liu Bei, the humble soul whose tears bind brothers; Guan Yu, the unbreakable blade of honor; and Zhuge Liang, the dragon of strategy. These six fates intertwine in beauty and blood, loyalty and cunning, mirrors of our own desires and vows. Settle in as we trace their paths, from gilded halls to riverstorm battlefields, one entwined thread at a time. Part 1. Diaochan, the Phantom's Glance. In Luoyang's shattered grandeur, 190 AD crackles with unrest. The 4th-century reign of Han blazes low. Famine gnaws the provinces, eunuchs line their pockets with gold, and a boy emperor 10 years old sits trapped beneath tattered banners. Comets tear the night sky, rivers choke on silt, and starving peasants spit curses at a court gobbling feasts. Into this decay slips Diaochan, a living whisper of danger and desire, her beauty primed to topple emperors and ignite the romance of the Three Kingdoms. But who is she? Historians and storytellers squabble. Some call her a courtesan, schooled in dance, song and seduction, a weapon honed by the dying court. Others swear she's Wang Yun's adopted daughter, raised by a poet-minister with a schemer's soul. Sable cicada, her name means, fleeting, untouchable, a phantom come to wreck kingdoms. Picture her gliding through Luoyang's torchlit halls, silks swirling, ink-black hair tumbling over her shoulders, every step a hush that stills swaggering warlords. Her eyes hold forbidden wine, her smile could bankrupt dynasties. No sword, no soldiers, yet power bends at her beckoning. Foul fate summons a brute, Zhang Jue, warlord from the western wastes. In 189 AD, using the emperor's death as pretext, he storms Luoyang with bloodthirsty riders, mud tracked across marble floors. He seizes the child emperor Xian, installs him as a hollow crown, then plunges the court into gluttony and terror. Gold reserves disappeared, ministers snatched from beds in the night, palaces incinerated, and the court dragged off to Chang'an. "Let the old world rot," he bellows under cavernous beams, crushing dissent beneath his iron heel. By his side stands Liu Bei, fierce adopted son, halberd spinning death in his wake, and loyalty as fragile as ice. Wang Yun, minister on the fringe, spies Dong's fatal flaw. While tremblers quake, Wang plots. Beauty cuts deeper than steel, he muses, choosing Diaochan for his gambit. Her mission: ensnare both tyrant and warrior, stoke a jealous inferno. At a lantern-lit banquet she dances, silk petals whirling, candlelight dancing in her eyes. Zhang Jue leans forward, spellbound, claiming her as concubine. Liu Bei, ever watchful, feels his heart thud at her glance. Soft, deliberate, sharpened to wound. For weeks, she plays their hearts like a lyre. With Zhang Jue, she's the doting beauty, offering wine with a practiced giggle, soothing his savage pride. With Liu Bei, she meets amid moonlit gardens, whispers secrets beneath drifting plum blossoms. My soul is yours, yet his chains bind me. The warrior, conqueror of battlefields, finds no defense against desire. Jealousy coils through the court. Zhang Jue growls at every stolen glance. Wang Yun fans each spark. Your son craves what is yours, my lord. A storm roils behind every curt nod, every forced smile. Then, in 192 AD, the trap snaps shut. At a dim banquet in Chang'an, wine flowing like rivers, Diaochan's trembling gaze, real or feigned, pushes Liu Bei beyond reason. He bursts in, halberd singing death, voice echoing off stone rafters. "This beauty is mine!" Dong Zhuo's hand darts for steel, but Liu Bei's strike is quicker. One brutal arc, and the tyrant's life pools on marble. Shock paralyzes the court. Diaochan, mission complete, vanishes into shadow. Some whisper exile, others swear she melds into legend. A phantom who felled a warlord with no blade. Chaos erupts anew. Liu Bei, lord of Chang'an in name alone, faces mutiny as Dong's loyal captains turn city streets into slaughter fields. He flees east, halberd powerless against revolt. Emperor Xian, shuffled like a pawn, pens frantic pleas. Heaven watches somewhere. In the north, Cao Cao, a fox-like tactician, looms, eyeing the orphaned throne. A puppet king is ripe for borrowing. Farther east, Liu Bei, weaver's son turned idealist, swears brotherhood with Guan Yu beneath blossoming peach trees, a fragile hope in a land aflame. Diaochan's haunting glance set all of this in motion. She shattered a tyrant, but the sparks birthed new storms. Liu Bei's fury, Cao Cao's shadow, Liu Bei's vow. Beauty, it seems, can build an empire and bury it within a single breath. As her silhouette fades from Chang'an's torchlit corridors, the thunder of war drums rises, and halberds thirst for the next betrayal. From silk to storm. Diaochan's tearful glance lingers like a ghost in the torchlight, her silken form slipping into the shadows of Chang'an as the tyrant's body cools on the floor. Wang Yun's scheme has worked its magic. Dong Zhuo, the brute who choked the Han's throat, lies slain by the hand he called son. The court stirs from its stupor, ministers whispering of deliverance, but the victory tastes of ash. Liu Bei stands over the corpse, his halberd dripping crimson, eyes wild with a mix of triumph and torment. "Father no more," he mutters, the weight of Diaochan's promise heavy in his chest. He claims her as his bride, a fleeting prize in the chaos, but the phantom's touch has marked him, her beauty a curse that twists loyalty into lightning. Yet empires don't fall quietly. Dong's loyalists, captains like Li Jue and Zuo Ci, men forged in the frontier's fire, rally in the streets, their spears hungry for vengeance. Chang'an erupts in brawls, the fortress city's walls echoing with clashes that turn allies to enemies. Liu Bei, the realm's unmatched warrior, finds his crown slipping. His brief rule crumbles under mutiny's boot. He flees east with Diaochan at his side, her presence a silken chain that both binds and burdens him. The boy Emperor Xian, that eternal pawn, is carted away once more, his pleas lost in the dust. The heavens shift, but who holds the reins? Far off, in the northern plains, a fox stirs. Cao Cao, sharp as a hidden dagger, scents opportunity in the wreckage. "A storm clears the path," he says to his aides, his grin hinting at banners yet to rise. Diaochan's spark has kindled more than murder. It scatters embers across a fractured land, drawing a thunderbolt into the fray. Liu Bei, mightiest arm in the realm, rides on, his halberd thirsty for new foes, his heart adrift in the wake of a phantom's glance. But storms don't conquer alone. They rage, they betray, and they drown. Part 2. Liu Bei, the storm's fury. From the ashes of Chang'an's bloodied halls, where Diaochan's glance felled a tyrant, strides Liu Bei, the storm's fury, a warrior whose name echoes like a war drum across the fractured Han Empire. In 192 AD, the romance of the Three Kingdoms crowns him the mightiest of men, his halberd a crescent of death that carves legends from battlefields. Picture him, towering and broad, armor gleaming under torchlight, his steed Red Hare snorting fire, a beast said to outrun the wind. Lu Bu is no mere soldier. He's a force of nature, a thunderbolt in human form, whose every swing scatters armies like leaves. Songs call him peerless, his blade a painter of chaos, his reputation a banner that draws both awe and dread. Yet for all his strength, loyalty slips through his fingers like sand. A fine irony, isn't it? The realm's greatest warrior, undone by a heart that wanders faster than his horse. Lu Bu's tale begins in the northern wilds of Zhuge, where he's born a son of the frontier, raised among nomads and blades. By his 20s, he's a legend whispered in taverns. The youth who wrestled bandits bare-handed, who felled 10 men with one swing at Bing Province's border wars. His halberd, Fangtian Huaji, becomes a myth of its own. Forged, they say, with a dragon's tooth, its arc slicing through armor like cloth. In 189, Zhang Jue, the Western warlord, sees this prodigy and claims him as his adopted son, binding him to Chang'an's court with promises of glory. Lu Bu, ever hungry for power, rides at Dong's side as he seizes the boy Emperor Xian, turning the Han's capital into a den of greed. But Diaochan's beauty, a silken trap woven by Minister Wang Yun, unravels it all. Her whispers of love ignite Lu Bu's jealousy, and in a wine-soaked rage, he buries his halberd in Dong's chest, toppling the brute who called him kin. "I am no man's shadow," he declares, standing over the corpse, Diaochan at his side like a fleeting dream. Victory is brief. Chang'an, the fortress city, turns on him. Dong's captains, men with grudges as sharp as their spears, spark mutinies, their street fights tearing the city apart. Lu Bu, the warrior who could rout 1,000, finds no shield against betrayal. He flees east with Diaochan and a loyal few, his halberd flashing in retreat, Red Hare's hooves pounding the dust. The emperor, shuffled like a pawn, remains behind, his pleas lost in the chaos. Heaven's mandate shifts, but nobody told the generals. Lu Bu's legend grows even in flight. Tales spread of him charging through ambushes, his halberd cutting a path where armies falter. At Hulao Pass, facing a coalition of warlords, he single-handedly holds the gate, his blade a whirlwind that sends lords scrambling. "One man, one horse, one myth," a bard sings, and the name Lu Bu becomes a warning to friend and foe alike. He lands in the eastern plains, seeking refuge with a new master, Yuan Shao, a noble lord with a peacock's pride and an army to match. Yuan, ruling from Ye, sees Lu Bu's strength as a prize, but his advisors warn of the warrior's fickle heart. "A tiger doesn't change its stripes," one mutters, and they're right. Lu Bu chafes under Yuan's command, his halberd idle, while Yuan's endless counsels drone. In 194, he betrays his host, seizing Yuan's outposts in a lightning raid that leaves the noble reeling. "I serve no man's leash," Lu Bu boasts, his armor splattered with the blood of Yuan's guards. The chronicles paint him as a storm unleashed. His charge at Puyang scatters Yuan's cavalry, Red Hare leaping barricades, Lu Bu's halberd felling 12 in a single pass. Yet his victories lack roots. He holds no land long, his allies dwindling as trust erodes. A fine jest, the mightiest arm in the realm, swinging for no cause but his own. By 196, Lu Bu's wanderings bring him to Shu province, a fertile land in the north, where he seeks shelter with Liu Bei, a weaver's son with a dreamer's claim to Han blood. Liu Bei, ever trusting, offers hospitality, despite warnings from his brother Guan Yu, a bearded warrior whose blade, Green Dragon Crescent, rivals Lu Bu's own. "A storm brings only ruin," Guan Yu growls, polishing his weapon. Liu Bei ignores him, granting Lu Bu a camp in Xiaopei. But loyalty to Lu Bu is a foreign tongue. In 197, backed by Yuan Shao's scheming cousin Yuan Shu, he strikes, seizing Shu in a midnight raid. Liu Bei flees, his small band of followers, Guan Yu and the thunder-voiced Zhang Fei trailing like loyal shadows. Liu Bei, now Lord of Shu, struts in stolen halls, Diaochan at his side, her beauty a fading echo of Chang'an's fire. "The realm bends to my blade," he declares, but his reign is a house of straw, built on betrayal's shaky ground. The storm's peak comes at Xiapi in 198, where Liu Bei makes his stand. Cao Cao, the cunning warlord of the north, moves to crush him. Cao Cao, who's watched Liu Bei's chaos with a fox's grin, brings an army hardened by years of conquest. Xiapi's walls, stout and river-ringed, seem a fortress for a legend, but Cao Cao plays dirty. He dams the Yi River, turning fields to mud and streets to streams. Liu Bei's cavalry, led by his trusted captain Zhang Liao, sinks in the mire. Red Hare, the peerless steed, falters in the flood. Inside the city, Liu Bei's temper frays. He snaps at Diaochan, alienates Zhang Liao, and ignores his advisor Chen Gong's pleas for strategy. "I am the storm," he roars from the ramparts, his halberd flashing defiance. But storms don't argue with water. The chronicles sing of his last charge. Liu Bei, alone atop the walls, cuts down a score of Cao Cao's scouts, his halberd a blur. Yet the flood creeps higher, and his men desert. Captured, bound like a fallen titan, Liu Bei faces Cao Cao in Xiapi's ruined square. His legend precedes him. Tales of Hulao's stand, Puyang's rout, and a halberd that carved rivers of blood. He pleads for mercy, his voice smooth as ever. "Join me, and we'll rule the world." Cao Cao hesitates, tempted by the warrior's might. Liu Bei, standing nearby, exiled by Liu Bei's betrayal, speaks softly. He's a storm that spares no one. Guan Yu, the bearded oathkeeper, steps forward, his green dragon blade gleaming. One stroke, and Liu Bei's legend ends, his head rolling in the mud. "The mightiest arm," Cao Cao sighs, betrayed by the weakest heart. A sardonic epitaph for a warrior whose halberd outshone his judgment. Liu Bei's fall ripples outward. Diaochan, the phantom who sparked his fury, fades further into myth. Some say she follows him to exile, others that she vanishes in Xiapi's flood. Cao Cao tightens his grip on the north, the puppet emperor Jian'an now firmly in his grasp. Liu Bei, driven from Shu, wanders with Guan Yu, their peach tree oath a flickering hope. The chronicles etch Liu Bei as a paradox, a warrior whose strength could topple mountains, yet whose betrayals built his pyre. At Hulao, he held a pass alone. At Puyang, he routed thousands. At Xiapi, he fought until the waters rose. His halberd, they say, still gleams in the songs of bards, a reminder that even legends drown when loyalty fails. As Liu Bei's thunder fades, the stage shifts. Cao Cao, the fox who outlasted the storm, sharpens his plans, his eyes on a throne he'll never claim outright. Liu Bei and Guan Yu, bound by their oath, seek new allies in a land of wolves. The storm's fury has cleared a path, but for whose ambition? From storm to fox. Liu Bei's halberd falls silent in Xiapi's mud, his head a grim trophy in Cao Cao's camp, the floodwaters receding with his final breath. The warrior's fury, once a force that shattered armies and betrayed masters, lies broken, his legend carved in blood at Hulao, Puyang, and now this drowned city. Guan Yu's blade, swung at Liu Bei's quiet nod, ends the mightiest arm the realm has known, but the cost lingers. Zhu province lost, an oath tested, and a wanderer's band scattered. Cao Cao stands over the scene, his cunning grin widening as he surveys the spoils. "The thunder's spent," he says to his aides, wiping rain from his brow. Liu Bei's fall is no mere chance. It's Cao Cao's design, a flood to drown a rival too wild to tame. Ambition doesn't mourn. Cao Cao, the warlord of the northern plains, has watched Lu Bu's chaos unfold like a badly planned feast. Diaochan's spark igniting the storm, Yuan Shao's alliances crumbling, Liu Bei's trust misplaced. With Lu Bu gone, Cao Cao turns to the boy Emperor Xian, rescuing him from the wreckage to Shu's halls. It's a clever move. Power without a crown, taxes flowing north, banners rising under Wei's iron grip. Liu Bei and Guan Yu flee, their peach tree oath a faint ember in exile, while Yuan Shao fumes in the east, his pride wounded. Cao Cao's mind, sharp as a hidden blade, schemes deeper. Guandu looms, where numbers face wits, and a poet's verse masks a strategist's hunger. Lu Bu's end clears the way for Cao Cao's rise. The cunning warlord steps forward, his plans ready to reshape a fractured land. Part 3, Cao Cao, the Fox's Grasp. Cao Cao was born in 155 AD to a minor aristocratic family better known for wheeling and dealing than charging into battle. As a boy, he earned a reputation for pranks. Once he borrowed a neighbor's hunting cap, sent the man on a wild chase through the hills, then returned the prize with a theatrical bow, and the entire village chuckled at his expense. On another occasion, he teased a pompous official for fussing over his absurdly long moustache. The official scowled. Onlookers laughed so hard they nearly tipped over their wine cups. Early on, people called him the Fox. Quick, clever, and a little slippery. Trouble followed his grin like a shadow, but it was the sort of trouble that ended in stories rather than sword wounds. By 184 AD, the Eastern Han Dynasty was unraveling. Corrupt eunuchs ran the court, taxes strangled the peasantry, and a religious healer named Zhang Jue rallied the poor under bright yellow scarves. The yellow turbans rose in revolt, and the imperial government panicked. A restless 29-year-old Cao Cao gathered a ragtag band of local volunteers, farmers, shopkeepers, the odd gossip-mongers, and camped outside the rebel strongholds. Rather than a flashy cavalry charge, he preferred dawn raids. Archers lay hidden among the trees. When the sun cracked the horizon, bolts darkened the sky. The mob of turbans, caught in a narrow valley, was cut to pieces or fled in panic. The court rewarded him with a rank, but within weeks, jealous eunuchs trumped up embezzlement charges and stripped it away. Undeterred, Cao Cao joked to his men that next time they should rob the imperial treasury instead. He went home richer in reputation and poorer in patience. By 189 AD, power in Luoyang had passed to Zhang Jue, a brutish general who seized the young Emperor Xian and turned the capital into his personal gluttony hall. He burned neighborhoods simply to spite rivals and treated the court like a drunken banquet. Several regional lords, Yuan Shao, Liu Bei and others, formed a loose alliance against him. They met for what one scribe called the great confab of hot air, trading insults with more vigor than swords. Cao Cao attended quietly, mapping escape routes. When the meeting fractured into petty squabbles, Yuan Shao spent half his words describing his own lineage. Cao led his troops away before the bickering turned to bloodshed. Within 3 years, Zhang Jue fell by Lu Bu's blade. Cao Cao watched the drama from the sidelines, already plotting his next move. In 196 AD, Cao Cao swooped into Luoyang and rescued Emperor Xian from a puppet master he deemed less competent. With elaborate ceremony, he escorted the young ruler to his own fortress city of Shu. Cao proclaimed, "The Son of Heaven deserves proper treatment," while private council penned every imperial edict. In effect, the throne became Cao Cao's figurehead. Officially, he bowed before the emperor. In practice, the emperor bowed before him. It was clout with a bow tie. No circus required. Northern China was starving. Bandits, former soldiers turned highwaymen, roamed every pass. Cao Cao devised the Tuntian system, turning idle soldiers into farmers. By day they tended fields, by night they trained with spear and sword. "No one fights well on an empty stomach," he quipped to his captains, who initially grumbled at hose over halberds. The plan worked. Granaries brimmed, roads cleared, and villages whispered his name with relief instead of fear. He recruited beggars, ex-thieves, even scholars dismissed as too poor to matter, arguing, "Lineage is fine for show horses, but give me a man who can wield a plough and a sword." His ranks swelled with fiercely loyal underdogs, and the north recovered while the south beckoned with open rebellions. Cao Cao could be ruthless. In 194 AD, after a minor insult linked to Liu Bei, he ordered a rogue region burned to the ground. Villages went up in flames, streams ran muddy for months. When a court poet later questioned the morality of such tactics, Cao shrugged in verse, "Better to bite first than bleed slow." In the rough world of warlords, his fox-like appetite for speed frightened adversaries and kept his own people well fed. By 200 AD, Cao Cao faced Yuan Shao's massive army at Guan Yu. Contemporary rumors boasted 700,000 of Shao's men against Chao's lean 40,000. Shao swaggered, "We'll flatten the fox." Cao Cao dug in, rationing supplies with surgical precision and baiting Shao with constant skirmishes. As his men joked about trading gallows humor for good wine, Chao sent a small team to torch Shao's crucial grain depot at Wuchao. Under cover of night, they set the granaries ablaze. Flames licked the sky. Shao's supply lines snapped. His ranks collapsed into panic. Cao Cao rode through the ruins at dawn, raised his cup, and murmured dryly, "Victory tastes less sweet than fear." The so-called fox had outfoxed the giant. Shortly after Guan Yu, Liu Bei and his fierce general Guan Yu drifted into Cao Cao's orbit. Cao Cao lavish gifts, polite words, and dinners recalling old friendships. Guan Yu repaid the kindness by escorting Cao Cao through bandit-infested lands, his Green Dragon Crescent Blade parting peril like a breeze. Cao Cao praised Guan with a rare sincerity, a man of honor in a kennel of hounds. Yet Liu Bei soon grew restless under the emperor's watchful eyes. Cao Cao sent them off with wagons brimming with silk and wine, and just a hint of suspicion planted in Liu Bei's mind. Courtesy, Cao joked later, could be as sharp as any blade. In 208 AD, Cao Cao seized Jing province, gateway to the Yangtze, and marshaled a vast fleet. Local accounts swelled his numbers to 800,000. Reality put it closer to 200,000. Still, he outnumbered the Southern Alliance led by Sun Quan and the brilliant strategist Zhuge Liang. Cao's flat-bottomed ships, ill-suited to river currents, were lashed together for balance. "Stability over style," he remarked, and perhaps that hubris cost him. When Zhou Yu set fireships ablaze in the narrow channels, Cao Cao's fleet went up in smoke. He fled on horseback, spattered with soot and bruised pride. "Even a fox shuns the drowning," he quipped to Zhang Liao, who only shook his head. Undeterred by water, Cao Cao turned north. In 207 AD, he crushed the Wuhuan tribes on the steppes, their chieftains kneeling and offering herds in a last plea. He accepted the tribute and released the rest with a wry smile. Good fur for mats, not mantles. In 219 AD, he sent forces to Hanzhong, only to find it held by the veteran archer Huang Zhong. One arrow from the grey-haired general struck true, earning him praise and a promotion. Cao Cao grumbled that seasons, not youth, sharpen a blade, an admission rare for a man better known for his swift judgments. Cao Cao's court teemed with characters. Guojia, a heavy-drinking prognosticator, barked out forecasts mid-guzzle. Shun Yu, the calm administrator, navigated court intrigues with quiet resolve. Both earned Cao Cao's trust over objections from pedigreed mandarins. "A name means nothing without deeds," he'd say, handing them new titles. His own sons, Cao Pi and Cao Zhang shadowed his every campaign. Pi, silver-tongued, finessed envoys. Zhang, broad-shouldered, led charges on the front lines. Cao Cao taught them war and governance alike, but the years wore on him. On sleepless nights, he penned poems to past friends and lost comrades, raising cups to the moon as if expecting an echo. By 220 AD, illness slowed him. He lamented the half-finished roads and unclaimed fields. In March, he fell gravely ill and summoned Cao Pi. With the emperor's seal in hand, Cao Pi forced Jian'an to abdicate, establishing the state of Wei. Though Cao Cao himself was never emperor, he had built Wei's foundations: grain reserves, irrigation canals, a professional bureaucracy. He was named Duke of Wei posthumously, but those who knew him whispered that he had long ruled in all but name. Cao Cao left a fractured land more stable than he found it. The north was fed, bandits routed, and a unified bureaucracy stood ready. His enemies labeled him a rogue, calling him thief and usurper. His followers praised him as a builder and poet. To both he offered a single answer over wine: titles belong to losers. Only deeds endure in the winding rivers and shattered temples. The memory of his cunning remained. A dragon stirred in the south under Liu Bei, a final challenge to the fox still holding the northern roads. And so the game continued. Deeds, drafts of poetry, and dry-eyed laughter echoing where swords once clashed. From fox to ember. Cao Cao's shadow stretches long across the north, his reforms taking root like weeds in fertile soil, his poems lingering in the air like smoke from a well-tended fire. Guan Yu's flames have faded, but the fox's grasp tightens, emperor in pocket, rivals scattered, the game tilted in his favor. Yet even foxes have their blind spots, and Liu Bei, the unassuming weaver's son, slips through the cracks. Exiled by Lu Bu's greed and wary of Cao Cao's velvet traps, Liu Bei wanders the borderlands with Guan Yu at his side, the bearded warrior's blade a constant reminder of oaths sworn under peach blossoms. The fox offers honeyed chains. Guan Yu mutters over a campfire, sharpening Green Dragon with rhythmic strokes. Liu Bei nods, his eyes on the horizon, that quiet fire in his chest refusing to gutter out. Cao Cao's hospitality was a gilded cage, Yuan Shao's court a den of peacocks. Neither fits a man who dreams of restoring the Han's lost light. The wanderer's path twists through exile's thorns. Betrayed once by the storm that was Lu Bu, Liu Bei knows trust's sharp edge all too well. He bounces from patron to patron, his small band, Guan Yu's unyielding honor, Zhang Fei's booming temper, a loyal flicker in a land of tempests. Cao Cao's gifts follow like echoes, subtle reminders of debts unpaid. But Liu Bei's heart pulls him west, toward a vision of virtue over vice, a realm where oaths hold and mercy mends. We swore to live and die as brothers, he reminds Guan Yu on a rain-lashed night, the peach garden's petals still vivid in memory. The fox may rule the plains, but embers smoulder in the underbrush, waiting for wind. Liu Bei's flame, humble yet stubborn, kindles anew. The oath brother steps forward, his blade ready to guard what the fox cannot claim. Part 4. Liu Bei, the Ember's Oath. In the waning years of the Eastern Han, when the pillars of court and countryside alike trembled under the weight of avarice and discord, one man's ember flickered stubbornly against the gathering storm. Cao Cao, the fox of the north, tightened his grip around the imperial remnants with relentless ambition and iron-shod strategy. He reshaped the Han Dynasty's crumbling ruins into a new order of his making. Cities rose where dust had settled. Armies marched where once courtiers whispered. Yet, in that age of swirling tempests, Liu Bei moved like a wisp of smoke on the wind, slipping through the fox's claws, refusing to vanish. In the great tapestry of the romance of the Three Kingdoms, he stands as the underdog, a humble dreamer whose quiet fire kindled hope in a land scorched by ravenous warlords. Born around 161 AD in Zhuo County, a place of golden wheat fields and ragged weaving sheds, Liu Bei entered the world as the son of a humble straw mat weaver. His father's rough hands spun bundles of reeds into floors for peasant homes. His mother, a gentle soul, spun stories. Each night by the lattice window, she wove tales of the Han's glorious past, emperors draped in dragon-stitched robes, mandarins dispensing justice like sunshine, nobles attending banquets scented with orchid and jasmine. She claimed the family bloodline traced back to those emperors, though neighbors snickered at the boast. To young Liu Bei, the lineage felt as real as the stick he toted in lieu of a scholar's brush. He clutched his mother's stories like treasure, nurturing a dream that he might one day stand beneath the same imperial canopy. Even as a boy, Liu Bei carried himself with something brighter than coin or status. In the dusty market square, he sold sandals handcrafted by his father, simple straw soles tied with thin hemp cords. He had no silver to bribe customers, but his grin was quick, his banter sharper than any merchant's. He cracked jokes about stubby toes and stiff backs, bowing deeply at each sale as though he'd just brokered a royal decree. The villagers, hungry for laughter in lean times, found themselves handing over coupons of grain in exchange for his cobbled wares. They called him Spark, for even when rain darkened the stalls, his laughter glowed. That ember, watered by hardship and nourished by hope, guided him through betrayals, exiles, and oaths that burned truer than the fiercest warlord's battle drum. When the Yellow Turban Revolt ignited in 184, painting the fields in brocade scarves and peasant banners, the Han Dynasty stiffened like a corpse in its shroud. Rebels rose to arms across the provinces, demanding redress for official greed and famines that claimed children by the score. Governments trembled, garrisons fell, yet Liu Bei, barely into his 20s, saw a chance to kindle his spark into a flame. With no treasury to siphon, he gathered a handful of neighbors, farmers, blacksmiths, kitchen boys, armed them with sharpened poles and homemade spears, drilled them between planting seasons and festival feasts. Their first test came at the crossroads of a narrow mountain pass, shrouded in dawn's mist. Rebels, confident in their numbers, pressed through, only to meet Liu Bei's ragtag line. Under his banner, a ragged cloth dyed with indigo, he led a charge, voice cracking out in rallying call. Long spears struck like thunderbolts. The pass became a cage of clashing steel. When day broke, the rebel ranks had fractured, their will shattered against one young man's unyielding resolve. Word of his tenacity reached the imperial court, where ministers out of gratitude offered Liu Bei a minor commission, enough to hang a lacquered plaque at his door, but not enough to buy an army. The real turning point came in the spring of 1844, in a secluded peach orchard outside the county seat. There, beneath boughs heavy with blossoms, Liu Bei knelt beside two strangers. Guan Yu, a mountain of a man crowned by a beard like a dark flag, and Zhang Fei, a butcher whose roar alone could crack stone. Petals drifted down like falling stars as they pledged, cup, to share life and death as brothers, to restore the Han's golden light. Brothers, Liu Bei whispered, voice soft with resolve. Let justice be our banner, loyalty our shield. In that moment, their bond aflame, they conceived a fellowship that, rumor claimed, would endure longer than empires. Liu Bei's rise, however, was far from a noble quest in shining armor. By 190, the Han Dynasty lay hollow. Zhang Jue, the tyrant of Luoyang, looted the city's treasures and set the palace ablaze, turning the imperial capital into his playground of violence. In response, a ragtag alliance of warlords formed, recalling Yuan Shao's hot-blooded followers and Cao Cao's cunning strategists. Liu Bei slipped into their ranks, silent and observant, his 300-strong company dwarfed by Yuan Shao's tens of thousands. When Liu Bei, the redoubtable blade of betrayal, slew Zhang Jue in 192, the alliance fragmented into 1,000 rival camps. Liu Bei passed from one minor appointment to the next, never able to anchor himself against the tide of giants. Fortune finally smiled in 194, when a dying lord of Shu province, impressed by Liu Bei's modesty and the loyalty he inspired, bequeathed his lands to the weaver's son. Shu province, with its fertile fields and bustling river ports, offered Liu Bei a chance to govern and defend. He set to work issuing fair decrees, pardoning minor offenders, rebuilding broken canals. Villagers came forward, offering supplies, their faith in him growing like summer wheat ready to harvest. Then Liu Bei stormed back into their world, dragon cavalry at his back, hunger for power in his eyes. With his customary charm, Liu Bei offered shelter, and Guan Yu's voice thundered warnings of treachery. But Liu Bei's heart, eager to believe in goodwill, prevailed. In the dead of night, 197, Liu Bei's betrayal struck like lightning. Under moonless skies, Shu fell to flames. Liu Bei and his sworn brothers fled through smoky streets, clutching nothing but hope and their solemn vow. Exile shadowed Liu Bei like a persistent spectre. In 1960, he found himself at Cao Cao's northern encampment, welcomed lavishly as a guest. Titles bestowed, land parcels granted, seats at the Warlords' polished rosewood tables. Yet every banquet felt like a gilded cage. Cao Cao's eyes gleamed with political calculus. Each toast carried a veiled threat. Guan Yu, ever vigilant, honed his Green Dragon Crescent Blade outside the pavilion, muttering about trusting foxes. Liu Bei smiled, joined in Cao's anecdotes, but his spirit lay elsewhere. When whispered rumors of espionage and darker plots drifted through the corridors, Liu Bei slipped away at dawn, his two brothers in tow, seeking sanctuary at Yuan Shao's court in the east. Yuan Shao's reception was all ceremonial drums and feasting, but substance was scant. Silk-draped courtiers bowed before the weaver's son, yet no troops, no treasure, no real support followed. Still, Liu Bei's genuine care for his men shone like a lantern in a sealed cave. When soldiers marched off empty-handed, he shared their rations. When villagers with worn roofs greeted him, he offered shelter and fair rent. "He's got no gold," one soldier said, "but he's got heart." That heart kept their small spark alive, even after Yuan Shao's crushing defeat by Cao Cao at Guandu in 200 left them adrift again. Wandering northward, Liu Bei slipped into Jing province under the hospitality of Liu Biao, a learned lord enthroned among bamboo groves and scholarly retreats. Biao welcomed him kindly, but kept him at arm's length, mindful of his own son's jealousy. Liu Bei settled into Jing, drilling troops along the riverside, adjudicating village disputes beneath maple trees. Yet the province simmered with tension. Biao's heirs whispered, Cao Cao's shadow loomed, and refugees from the north arrived daily, bellies hollow and spirits broken. In 207, word reached Liu Bei of a recluse in Nanyang, Zhuge Liang, the crouching dragon whose intellect surpassed any general on the land. Determined, Liu Bei trekked through winter's sludge, first once, then twice, each time rebuffed by suspicious sentries. On his third pilgrimage, rain froze into needles on bamboo leaves, and Liu Bei's robes clung to his frame like wet moss. He found the thatched cottage deserted except for a fan left to catch dust. Kneeling, he wrote an earnest letter, vowing to rescue the Han with virtue and wisdom. At dawn, Zhuge Liang appeared, fan flicking as though conducting an unseen orchestra. "Your plan," he mused, "will be as bold as a dragon's flight." And so emerged the Longjong plan. Partition the realm into three: north to Cao Cao's Wei, south to Sun Quan's Wu, west to Liu Bei's Shu, balanced under a roof of virtue over might, that dream tempered reality in 208 when Cao Cao advanced on Jing, crushing Liu Biao's heir under the weight of siege engines and iron boots. Liu Bei fled southward, banners trailing like comets in twilight. Along the riverbank at Changban, Cao's cavalry thundered close, their trumpets garish with victory. Behind him trailed refugees, women weeping for stolen homes, children too young to dream. Facing certain slaughter, Guan Yu anchored the rear with his crescent blade, cutting a path through steel. At a narrow wooden bridge, Zhang Fei bellowed challenge into the night, his roar splintering Cao's scouts. Liu Bei, tears in his eyes, sent the oldest women and children across the plank, choosing to save his core force. That night, as water lapped at the pilings and moonlight sketched warriors in silver, the refugees whispered of the last hope of Han, rallying to his battered standard. On the far bank, Liu Bei joined forces with Zhou Yu, lord of the Wu kingdom and Sun Quan's trusted general. Zhuge Liang masterminded a gambit, arrows borrowed under moonless boats, fireships loosed upon Cao Cao's fleet. Flames roared like dragons unleashed. Planking warped, oars melted. Imperial banners fell blazing into the river's embrace. Though Liu Bei did not light the fuse himself, his unshakable faith held the alliance together, earning him a foothold in Jing that would become Shu's cradle. In his new southern domain, Liu Bei's strength lay not in stone walls, but in people. He granted amnesty to deserters, distributed grain when famine struck the river towns, and set up schools where children learned letters as well as spear drills. He married Lady Sun, sister to Sun Quan, a union stitched with ceremony beneath vermilion arches and lacquered pavilions, promising peace through bloodlines as much as treaties. Yet, for all his benevolence, Liu Bei's mercy remained a double-edged sword. The same trust that led him to harbour Lu Bu in Shu had once cost him a province. Cordial years under Yuan Shao had yielded nothing but delay. "Mercy is a gamble," Zhang Fei once snarled at his lord, "and every wager brings knives to the table." But that wager also bound men like Zhao Yun to his side. One hot dusk at Changban, the young general dashed into the torrent of Hua Tuo's arrows to pluck Liu Bei's infant son from death's throat. Cradling the boy against his breast, Zhao Yun turned back through hail and havoc to safety. "He's the only lord worth bleeding for," Zhao Yun declared, and countless others nodded through tears. By 211, Liu Bei's gaze turned westward toward the rugged mountains of Yi Province, a land of emerald valleys and stone-terraced fields, ruled by the scholarly Liu Jiang. The invitation read like a promise. Liu Bei would help repel marauding bandits in exchange for lodging and goodwill. Zhuge Liang, eyes gleaming, saw opportunity ripening like a fruit. Marching with banners fluttering under sunrise skies, Liu Bei arrived, kneeling humbly before Liu Jiang's curved throne. He spoke of shared purpose, of the Han's restoration, of mutual defense. When quiet supporters whispered plots into Liu Jiang's ear, the governor invited Liu Bei deeper into the province, into humble banquets and strategy councils. 6 months passed like a single breath. Then, before dawn, one mist-wreathed morning, Liu Bei's camp unfurled its banners in rebellion. Advisers who had urged peace vanished. Liu Bei embraced his old vow with sword and honor. Within weeks, Chengdu's gates opened, and Yi Province was his. He named his realm Shuhan, evoking the ancient empire he had sworn to revive. Guan Yu, true as jade, held Jing. Zhang Fei guarded the mountain passes. Zhuge Liang sketched strategies by candlelight in his yamen. Shuhan rose from nothingness, a kingdom born of faith and the sweat of peasant brows. Cao Cao's Wei in the north bristled with legions. Wu in the south polished its fleet, but in the west flickered an ember no flood could douse. When courtiers bowed Liu Bei as emperor in 221, he accepted the Jade Seal with bowed head, aware of the weight greater than gold. Cao Cao scoffed from afar. Zhuge Liang knelt in reverence. Liu Bei's greatest flaw, his boundless compassion, wove tragedies into his tapestry. In 219, Guan Yu fell victim to Wu's cunning ambush. Liu Bei's grief shattered normalcy. He raised a banner of vengeance, only to languish in a campaign that depleted his stores and morale. Yet from those very failures sprang the kingdom's roots. Men once nameless now called themselves Shu's defenders. Exiles found homes in Chengdu's gates. Dreamers like Liu Bei found reason to rise each dawn. His path, etched in loss and loyalty, illuminates the oath's enduring steel. Brothers in blood and spirit stand ready for the next chapter. First among them, Guan Yu, the bearded sentinel, lifts his blade once more, prepared to carve a fresh stanza in the annals of Shu Han. Under his unwavering gaze, the quiet fire of their pledge smoulders with promise. The Han shall rise again. Part 5. Guan Yu, the Oath's Edge. In the waning years of the Eastern Han Dynasty, when the empire's gilded halls echoed with corruption and warlords' ambitions, a single spark of promise glowed in the west. Liu Bei's fledgling cause, little more than an ember born of lofty dreams, needed a champion whose very name would be whispered through the ages. That champion was Guan Yu, a warrior whose loyalty and ferocity would come to embody the sacred ideals of brotherhood and honor. His life reads like the brush strokes of a master painter, every stroke deliberate, every hue rich with meaning, every moment charged with the restless energy of an age tearing itself apart. Born around 160 AD, among Shaanxi's rugged hills, Guan Yu arrived in the world far from the refined courts and salons of the capital. His youth was wild as the mountain winds. Tales say he once crushed a local bully so thoroughly that the man never rose again, an act that forced the young giant into exile. With nothing but his might and his unshakable sense of right, he became a wandering sword for hire, moving from dusty market towns to thatched villages. Wherever he went, people spoke not of his pedigree, but of his deeds. The time he shut down a tavern brawl with a single glare, or when he gave his last bowl of rice to a starving widow and her children. He stood so tall that farmers claimed his head brushed the low-hanging eaves as he passed. His beard, a flowing banner of black, trailed behind him like the tail of a comet. And always at his hip, cradled in a carved scabbard of jade and iron, was the Green Dragon Crescent, an ornate halberd rumoured to have been balanced by a Taoist sage in a single breath. To Guan Yu it was more than a weapon. It was a covenant, to defend the weak, to uphold justice, and to honour any vow once uttered. In the spring of 184, when peach blossoms painted the world in soft pink and white, destiny brought Guan Yu to a modest estate outside the capital. There, beneath arching limbs heavy with blooms, he knelt beside two brothers, the devoted Liu Bei, claiming descent from the Han's imperial line, and the fiery Zhang Fei, a warrior whose roar could shatter 1,000 shields. In a ceremony, equal parts solemn and surreal, the three men pledged their lives to one another. Their blood, mingled in an ornate cup carved from a single peach pit, sealed an oath to restore the Han, to end the empire's suffering. As petals drifted down around them, the bond became more than mere words. It was fate itself made flesh. Guan Yu swore he would rather die 10,000 deaths than betray his brothers. And that vow became his compass, his burden, and ultimately his glory. No sooner had the oath settled in their bones than the earth shook with upheaval. The Yellow Turban Revolt, an uprising of peasants, mystics, and starving farmers, erupted across the northern plains. Corrupt officials, fattened on bribes and opium, found their mansions set ablaze. In the midst of this chaos, Liu Bei's trio marched to war, armed with little beyond grit and the righteousness of their cause. Guan Yu's footprint in the field was swift and absolute. At Luoyang's outskirts, he led the charge across scrolled grass shivered by autumn winds. Each swing of his Green Dragon Crescent cleaved uniforms and bone alike, as if time slowed to witness a living whirlwind. On one infamous dawn, his roar stamped out a rebel push that threatened to break their line. By day's end, the enemy routed, survivors whispering his name with equal parts fear and awe. Such feats earned them only minor titles and paltry lands, for the Han court was too broken to reward virtue. Instead, the warlords jockeyed for power, and chaos swallowed any hopes of order. In 189, the tyrant Zhang Jue seized the capital, his towering frame draped in purple silk, a dagger ever at his side. He shattered the last remnants of imperial authority, turning court politics into a theatre of terror. Allies fractured, back doors clogged with bribes, and the three kingdoms' greatest generals eyed one another's throats. Through it all, Guan Yu remained Liu Bei's silent sentinel. When the brothers served under one patron after another, first under Gongsun Zan, then Yuan Shao, he moved like a shadow, watching, waiting, never forgetting the Peach Garden vow. His allegiance was unshakable, even when the world seemed to demand betrayal. In 197, fortune briefly smiled upon Liu Bei. He seized Shu province, a thriving land of rice paddies and fishing boats, and prepared to build his own castle. Into this calm harbour arrived Lu Bu, the famed flying general, whose prowess was matched only by his fickleness. Brimming with arrogance, Lu Bu sought refuge, only to betray his host under the cover of night. Guan Yu sensed the trap from the moment Lu Bu's black war horses stamped into camp. He stood guard by Liu Bei's door, green dragon at the ready, each tap of steel against stone a promise of bloodshed. When Lu Bu's men struck, Guan Yu roared into the fray, his halberd carving an arc of moonlight that scattered assassins like startled birds. He smashed through encircling ranks, clearing a path for Liu Bei's escape. Later, Cao Cao, the cunning fox of the north, would offer him land, titles, even an embroidered banner in his honor. But Guan Yu never relaxed. He polished his blade through every banquet, ever watchful of the fox's hidden teeth. When Liu Bei slipped away to join Yuan Shao's camp, Guan Yu accompanied him, cutting down bandits to safeguard their flight. Cao Cao, impressed by such unwavering loyalty, called him a man of true righteousness. Yet Guan Yu cared not for flattery or favor. His heart remained bound to the Peach Garden oath. Perhaps the most fabled chapter in Guan Yu's saga unfolded at Hulao Pass. Cao Cao, having been trapped between rival armies, found himself fleeing through hostile territory, his prospect dim as dusk. Guan Yu, holding Cao Cao's rearguard, encountered him at the narrow mountain pass. Soldiers whispered, this was the moment to claim vengeance, to vent centuries of ambition. But Guan Yu's code was iron. The fox who had once sheltered his brothers now needed sanctuary. Under moonlight that turned his halberd into a sliver of white fire, Guan Yu stepped aside, letting Cao Cao pass unchallenged. He escorted him through ambush and storm, parting only when the old enemy had reached safety. Zhang Fei's protests would rumble like distant thunder. You wield honor as a weapon, brother, but do not let it bind you in chains. Yet the deed was done. To Guan Yu, mercy was not weakness, but the greatest expression of strength. By 208, Liu Bei had found refuge in Jing province, a land of swampy deltas and thick bamboo forests. But peace was short-lived. Cao Cao's legions swept south like a black tide, forcing Liu Bei into one of history's most desperate retreats. At Chang'an Bridge, the world narrowed to smoke, blood, and thunderous hooves. Guan Yu again took the rear, his green dragon a spinning beacon of defiance. As enemy cavalry thundered across the plain, he felled horse after horse, pausing only to reach back and hoist fleeing families onto passing wagons. Zhang Fei stood at the bridge's guard, bellowing challenges that reverberated through the night. Yet it was Guan Yu's silent onslaught that bought the time Liu Bei needed. When dawn broke, their little band had vanished into the mists of legend. With Jing province under Liu Bei's banner, Guan Yu became the lauded defender of Fan Castle, a stronghold perched atop a craggy hill overlooking the great river. In 219, Cao Cao's northern host advanced once more, their banners blotting out the sun. Ingenious as ever, Guan Yu ordered the floodgates opened. Fields turned into a vast inland sea, drowning supply trains and drowning the enemy's confidence. When the soldiers floundered, he led a furious assault, his green dragon cleaving through ranks like a scythe through grain. Cao Cao's general Yu Jin lost 10,000 men beneath those waters, and bards forever sang of the tempest unleashed by Guan Yu's hand. Fame and power swelled around him like the tides, but pride, that oldest foe of heroes, crept in. Guan Yu turned away requests for reinforcements, convinced that Fan Castle's walls and his own righteousness could withstand any storm. His hubris did not go unnoticed. Across the river lay the realm of Sun Quan, whose grip on the south was firm yet cunning. In 219, under cover of night, Sun Quan dispatched Lu Meng, a strategist as silent as death, whose soldiers slipped past Fan's patrols disguised as merchants. By the time Guan Yu realized the true nature of the trading party, the castle gates had fallen. Wounded and outnumbered, he made a final dash to the nearby town of Maicheng. There, in a rice barn lit only by tremulous lantern light, he raised his green dragon one last time, sending foe after foe crashing to the ground. But mortal wounds and numbers told their story. He was overwhelmed, captured, and offered a choice, to kneel or to die. True to his vow, he spat the words of surrender away and prepared for the end. His head was cut from his shoulders and sent south as a grisly trophy to Cao Cao. Even the fox could not hide a note of respect when he received it. Amid courtly fanfare, Guan Yu's severed head was buried with honors reserved for the greatest of heroes. The world shuddered at the news. Liu Bei, upon hearing of his brother's fall, led an ill-fated campaign in vengeance that nearly shattered Shu's foundations. Zhuge Liang, the brilliant sleeping dragon, who had joined Liu Bei in the Peach Garden's earliest days, watched both sorrow and strategy twist in the breeze. He had built his hopes on the dead man's loyalty and strength. Without Guan Yu's blade in the vanguard, even Zhuge's plans teetered on a knife's edge. Cao Cao tightened his northern grip, wary of the ruthless emissary his stolen mercy had spawned. Yet even he, in whispered moments, admitted he had lost a rival worth more than 10 battle-hardened legions. For across the lands of Shu, Wu, and Wei, bards and temple bell-ringers struck up paeans to Guan Yu's memory. Shrines rose on mountain-tops and riverbanks, where the faithful came to worship the god of loyalty, and to learn the danger of pride untempered by prudence. Part 6. Zhuge Liang, the Dragon's Coil. Guan Yu's fall struck Shu like a thunderbolt in clear skies, ripping a jagged wound in her heart. The Green Dragon Crescent Blade lay silent, its curved steel dulled by the southern fox Yue Ying's treachery. Liu Bei, his brow creased with grief, felt his ember of hope shrink to a grey cinder. Yet in the smoke and ash of despair, another mind emerged. A crouching dragon, coiled and patient, ready to breathe new life into a shattered kingdom. In the romance of the Three Kingdoms, this dragon was Zhuge Liang, the sage whose intellect could bend battles as a mountain stream carves valleys in stone. Zhuge Liang was born in 181 AD, in the gentle fields of Yangdu, Shandong. The Han Dynasty still ruled the land. but its foundations cracked with each passing year. Orphaned early, the boy grew under his elder brother's care. By lamplight, he devoured scrolls on philosophy, military treatises, and the ancient classics, his mind sharpening like a whetstone against steel. He learned to read the stars, chart the coursing rivers, and foresee how human ambition warped the currents of fortune. His childhood passed in quiet study. When warlords seized the north and yellow turbans brought ruin to the countryside, Zhuge remained distant, a scholar more at home beneath bamboo groves than in the clangor of steel. In his 20s, he retreated to a humble thatched hut near Wancheng, in Nanyang. There, he lived the life of a recluse, his only companion a feathered fan crafted of pheasant plumes, which he twirled absent-mindedly as he mapped the world's hidden patterns. Villagers spoke in hushed tones of the sleeping dragon, imagining the day when the hermit's brilliance would awaken and shift the balance of power. They would point to his empty door, whispering that destinies waited behind its simple frame. Meanwhile, Liu Bei wandered a landscape rent by ambition and blood. His oath with Guan Yu and Zhang Fei still bound him to a dream of restoring the Han. But after Guan Yu's fall in 219, that dream began to unravel. Defeated by Lu Meng's cunning, Guan Yu's head was sent north to Cao Cao as proof of Wu's triumph. Liu Bei's heart cracked in two, one half still burned with vengeance for his fallen brother, the other dimmed by hopelessness. It was then that word reached him of the sleeping dragon in Nanyang, a man whose mind could weave kingdoms from chaos. Thus began the legend of the 3 visits. In late 206, Liu Bei rode into the hills of Nanyang, lanterns flickering against dense bamboo. Twice he came and found only desertion. The hut stood empty, fan and scrolls gone, as if the maestro had vanished. On his 3rd journey, dusk settled over the pines. Liu Bei called out, "Great sir, the Han Dynasty bleeds. Will you not lend your talent to its rescue?" At these words, Zhuge Liang stirred, footsteps soft as falling leaves. He emerged fan in hand, calm as a moonlit pond. With measured speech, he revealed the Longzhong Plan, a grand scheme to divide the realm into 3 powers: Cao's iron north, Sun Quan's river south, and Liu Bei's righteous west. It was not a battle cry, but a blueprint, a game of strategy where kingdoms would emerge like pieces on a chessboard. Liu Bei, weary and war-torn, felt the ember of hope surge back into flame. The weaver's son had found his weaver of dreams. Jing province became Zhuge's proving ground. In 208, Cao Cao's forces swept south along the Han River like a high tide, driving Liu Bei to a desperate flight. The night at Chang'an was dark with sorrow, the cries of families, the clatter of horses, and the clashing blades as Guan Yu and Zhang Fei held the pass. Amid the chaos, Zhuge Liang rode silently, his fan flicking rhythmically as if measuring each heart-pound of fear. He saw that brute strength alone could not save Shu. Alliances must be forged of trust and cunning. He turned southward to Sun Quan's court at Ruxu. There he met Zhou Yu, a brilliant but hot-blooded strategist whose eyes flared suspicion at this newcomer. In the grand hall lined with painted screens, Zhuge spoke with such clarity and authority that Zhou Yu found himself nodding, even as jealousy simmered beneath his robe. They formed a pact. Liu Bei's forces and Sun Quan's navy would join to break Cao Cao's grip on Jing. Yet Zhuge stole the curtain of fame for himself. Under cover of pre-dawn mist, he dispatched straw-stuffed vessels toward Cao Cao's fleet. As the drifting boats neared the enemy camp, archers rained arrows upon the lifeless hulls. When night fell, the warlords counted more than 100,000 borrowed arrows sticking from the straw, supplies captured without a sword drawn. Zhou Yu's rage burned hotter than the fires of war, but the alliance held firm. At the decisive Battle of Red Cliffs, Zhuge's genius shone brightest. He predicted a sudden east wind and timed his plan to perfection. When the breeze rose, lighting Zhou Yu's fireships, Cao Cao's bound fleet became a roaring inferno. Flames licked the sky, smoke choked the river, and the northern host broke its chains in panic. Cao Cao fled, leaving the river free, and Shu's future afloat on embers. Through it all, Zhuge remained serene, his fan brushing each breath, as if welcoming destiny's breath into his hands. After Red Cliffs, Shu's twofold rise demanded careful stewardship. In 214, Liu Bei turned his eyes westward to Yi Province, a land of misty mountains and fertile valleys. With Zhuge Liang's meticulous plans, supply lines traced along hidden paths, spies woven into local tribes, and promises of fair treatment to peasants, the conquest unfolded with minimal bloodshed. When Liao Dai, the governor, opened the gates in trust, Liu Bei's forces entered with banners unfurled, welcoming a new era of stability where abuse of power would be punished, not condoned. But Zhuge's talents were not confined to battlefield stratagems. He viewed governance as an extension of war. Both required intelligence, order, and compassion. In Chengdu, Shu's new capital, he constructed a court of merit. Farmers who tilled the fields became officers, scholars who debated in bamboo groves drafted laws, and commoners found their voices heard in assemblies. He innovated wooden oxen, hulking supply wagons propelled by hidden gears, and devised early wheelbarrows to transport rice across rugged passes. When rebellions flared among the Nanman tribes in the deep south, he led a southern expedition in 225. There, he captured the fiery chief Meng Huo 7 times. Each capture ended with a pardon and wise words, turning fear into loyalty. Force bends, minds bind, Zhuge declared, his fan flicking motes of dust from the midday sun. By the campaign's close, the tribes accepted Shu's rule, not under threat of steel, but through respect and genuine reconciliation. Yet the canvas on which Zhuge Liang painted his greatest strokes lay to the north, the realm of Wei under Cao Cao, and later his steely successor, Cao Pi. From 228 onward, Zhuge led a series of northern expeditions, hoping to crack Wei's iron grip. His first move at Xishan saw his troops threading mountain passes like liquid shadows, circling the enemy and severing supply lines. At Mount Dingjun, clever ambushes forced Wei generals to fall back in disarray. Then came the legend of the empty fort strategy. Facing Sima Yi, Wei's cautious turtle, Zhuge abandoned a formidable garrison at Jieting, leaving big gates wide open, drums silent. He sat upon the walls playing his zither, wind-whipped hair framing a calm face. Sima Yi, haunted by tales of hidden traps, ordered retreat, unwilling to risk his troops in unknown peril. Word of this feat spread through Wei's camps like wildfire. Fear bred from mere reputation. Not every plan succeeded. At Chenkang, his crossbows decimated Wei's columns until he was obliged to withdraw for lack of reinforcements. Worse still was the disaster at Jieting, where Ma Su, Zhuge's gifted but headstrong protégé, disobeyed orders by camping atop a hill. Sima Yi pounced, turning Shu's archers into targets. When Zhuge arrived on the frantic battlefield, he found chaos incarnate. Though hearts broke to lose a talented young officer, Zhuge executed Ma Su for dereliction, a painful reminder that discipline must not yield to compassion. Tears streaked his cheeks as he penned the edict. Plans are only as strong as the hands that hold them. All the while, Liu Bei's grief over Guan Yu's death lingered like a shadow over every campaign. Angered by Sun Quan's betrayal, Liu Bei launched a reckless offensive in 221, dragging Shu's resources into a futile siege at Yiling. Zhuge warned against it, urging focus on Wei's vulnerabilities, but the oath of brotherhood scorched Liu Bei with rage. The campaign ended in humiliating defeat, forcing Shu to regroup on its western hills. In 223, Liu Bei breathed his last, entrusting his young son, Liu Shan, to Zhuge Liang's guardianship. The title of regent bestowed upon the sleeping dragon piled fresh burdens upon his shoulders. Now, he must not only lead armies, but also steer the state through peacetime council and planning. Years of drafting laws, supervising harvests, and inspecting fortifications passed under his watchful eye. Each dawn saw his fan flick through reports of rice yields. Each dusk found him poring over troop dispositions. By 234, Zhuge Liang was 60, and the strain etched deep lines into his face. Yet when Sima Yi threatened to capitalize on Shu's exhaustion, Zhuge devised a final deception. At Wujiang Plains, he camped behind wooden palisades, feigning fatigue. Illness seized him, his body weakened by constant toil. Yet, in a last act of cunning, he sat propped upright in his chariot, fan in hand, a ghostly silhouette at dawn's first light. Sima Yi, recalling the empty fort, paused in awe and retreated. Shu's army melted away into the mountains, spared the terror of a pitched battle. Later that day, Zhuge Liang drew his final breath. His fan slipped from his grasp, drifting to the ground like falling autumn leaves. Zhuge Liang's flaw was his vision, grand designs too vast for Shu's modest strength. He dreamed of restoring the Han to its former glory, but Shu's lean coffers and scattered populace could not fill the colossal frame of his strategies. After his death, Liu Shan lacked both the fire and the mind to sustain the dragon's legacy. Shu shrank under the weight of Wei's steady advances and Wu's river defenses, until finally she crumbled into history's tide. Yet the legend of Zhuge Liang endured, blossoming into myth. Bards travelled the roads, singing tales of the dragon who spun fog into arrows, turned empty walls into fortresses, and wove a weaver's simple vow into a kingdom. Temples rose in his honor, rivaling even those of Guan Yu himself. Scholars inscribed parables of borrowed arrows and empty forts into journals of military art. Cao Cao's heirs spoke of him with respect. Cao Pi once remarked that nights spent brooding over Zhuge's strategies robbed him of restful sleep. Zhuge Liang's legacy is the dragon's coil, an intellect that compressed chaos into order, transforming desperation into hope. He gave Liu Bei's ember a hearth in the west, and bound Guan Yu's memory to a cause greater than vengeance. Although his fan has long since stilled, the oath of the three heroes continues to glow in each telling of his story. The world he shaped with ink and foresight may have slipped from Shu's grasp, but the dragon's breath still warms the hearts of those who seek victory through mind as well as blade. The commoner's struggle, the legend of Lu Bu's roar echoing through blood-slicked fields, Cao Cao's hawk-like gaze, Liu Bei's gentle sorrow, blaze across the annals of the romance of the three kingdoms. But step away from the warlords' silk-draped standards and the clash of iron, and you'll find the real heartbeat of the age. The common folk, plough-toothed farmers, dusty-booted merchants, ragged wanderers, who trudged through ash-choked roads as thunderous armies danced their deadly reels. In the late 1800s, as the Han Dynasty crumbled like wet sand beneath a rising tide, life for ordinary souls was no leisurely stroll. Imagine wind-blasted granaries standing empty, lacquer-faced tax collectors brandishing iron rods, and ragtag prophets promising salvation, while warring lords turned emerald fields into crimson battlegrounds. No luxury of escape, no steam-blasted inbox to refresh, a daily grind for survival in a land where pledging loyalty could cost your life and hunger gnawed at every fleeting hope. Here is the three kingdoms seen from ground level, where the dirt underfoot speaks truths that no imperial decree can drown. The Han's collapse arrived not with a glorious trumpet, but a long, pained groan. By 184, The capital stank of corruption. Corridors crowded with scheming eunuchs and slick officials who siphoned the imperial coffers dry, leaving empty bowls in peasant villages. In the countryside, despair was measured in grain, taxes so ravenous that winter promised only cold air and hollow stomachs, droughts cracking the earth open like broken pottery, floods swallowing what little remained of last season's toil. Families auctioned children like livestock to satisfy debts. Others fled to forested hills, joining bands of desperate brigands who shared one meal among 20 men. Into this festering misery strode Zhang Jue, a former healer whose copper-lined hands had seen too many bodies laid out cold. He draped his followers in saffron scarves, baptizing them with dreams of heaven on earth. The yellow turbans, farmers scarred by sun and sweat, weavers with frayed spindles, the destitute with nothing to lose, rallied behind his fevered sermons. When they marched, their chants rolled across valleys like thunderclouds, their torches painting the night in fierce orange. They burned county outposts and shook the emperor's gilded court. Yet salvation was a brittle promise when warlords answered peasant cries with sharpened swords instead of grain. The cruelest joke lay in rebelling for a better life, only to be conscripted into another army, or carved into fodder for the battlefield. To live as a commoner was to dodge one disaster, only to stumble into the next. If you escaped the taxman's lash, you might find yourself pressed into service by a recruiter who fed you grand speeches instead of rice. Farmers who clung to their fields had to ward off bandits. Once familiar neighbors, now gaunt shadows, desperate enough to seize the last handful of millet from a widow's pot. Women spun coarse hemp into thread by flickering lantern light, fingers stiff with cold, hoping a length of cloth would earn them a bowl of porridge. Children, their bellies hollow, scavenged ploughed fields for roots and insects. Merchants, perched atop creaking wagons, navigated roads choked with thieves and tolls. One wiry trader named Li Feng became legend for disguising his cargo of silver as rot-soaked grain, slipping past a warlord's checkpoint under the noses of sleeping sentries. "Brains outshine blades," he sneered, though most had neither the wit nor the fortune to pull such a feat. Markets shriveled as safe passages turned to war zones, and any profit was gladly requisitioned for some lord's endless quarrel. Under Cao Cao's tightening grip in the north, taxes weren't levied, they were stamped into your back with an iron heel. Yet amid the clamour of poverty and fear, glimmers of hope surfaced like stubborn green shoots in charred soil. Village elders gathered by embers and spun tales of heroic outlaws and celestial champions, transforming bleak winter nights into epic sagas. A peasant girl named Zhang Chunhua earned quiet fame when she outwitted a leering tax collector. She hollowed out logs to hide her family's grain, stacking them by the roadside as firewood until the collector left, his ledger still empty. Word of her cunning spread faster than any court edict. Soon, villagers swapped secret caches and hidden hollows, trading chuckles at officials' red-faced stumbles. "Outfox the court, outlast the war," became a whispered mantra beneath every thatched roof. Some turned to Taoist wanderers, part healer, part charlatan, who sold hand-painted talismans promising safety from bandits or favor from unseen spirits. One mystic named Zuo Ci was rumored to vanish in mid-arrest, leaving soldiers grasping at scents of sandalwood and myth as he strolled away through locked gates. True or not, the stories fed a hunger for joy in a world starved for laughter. The Yellow Turban Revolt burned hot but brief. By 185, it lay buried in crushed skulls and trampled fields. Yet their spark ignited 1,000 embers. Rebellion became a murmured promise among the broken. Commoners no longer waited for rescue. They bartered, schemed, adapted. Women like Ma Yunlu, sister to a horse trader, took up spears and rode in militia bands to protect their villages, earning wary nods from men who once scorned a weak arm. Merchants such as Mi Zhu turned gold coins into private armies, slipping past tax collectors with ledgers as sharp as any spear tip. These were no imperial legends of silk and steel, but their grit and cunning kept the age alive. Irony dripped like morning dew. While warlords battled for thrones, it was the farmer's plough and the merchant's ledger that sustained the war. For the common folk, life was no heroic ballad. It was mud-soaked tunics, sweat-burned brows, and the rare, hard-won victory against impossible odds. Zhang Jue's yellow scarves faded in the sun, but the fire of defiance lived on in every hidden grain store, every disguised silver bar, every tale spun under starlight. As the lords of war, Yuan Shao, Sun Quan, and their ilk, sharpened their blades, the people sharpened their wits, surviving in a land where empires toppled like fragile dominoes, and hope, stubborn as a weed-cracking stone, refused to die. Their battered triumphs laid the groundwork for the next act, when minor kings and their riotous gambits would seize center stage. Warlords and their games. The commoners of the Three Kingdoms era eked out a living beneath the blistering sun and sting of winter winds, their lives measured in calloused hands and hollow stomachs, a quiet heartbeat beneath the collapse of Han. All around them, warlords strutted like gaudy roosters in a barnyard of ruin, each convinced his voice would echo from the palace walls. In the romance of the Three Kingdoms, legendary figures hogged the spotlight, but the true crucible of chaos was among the lesser lords, men with swords that gleamed in the torchlight, egos larger than the banners they unfurled, and dreams that shattered like dried clay in a sudden storm. By the late 1800s, the Han Dynasty was a tapestry unraveling at the edges, its boy emperor more marionette than monarch, jerked about by whichever commander boasted the sharpest blade or sweetest promises. These warlords weren't merely carving out territory. They were locked in a merciless ballet of shifting alliances, whispered betrayals, and grandstanding where a single misstep could send a man's head tumbling into the dust. Imagine a high-stakes poker table, but swap chips for legions and poker faces for knifed grins. A fine mess indeed, ambition draped in silk, tripping over its own hem. In 189, the imperial palace went up in flames, its gilded hallways a furnace of smoke and fear, and Zhang Jue, an ogre in battered armor, snatched the young Emperor Xian as if seizing a puppet crown. His reign of grotesque pageantry flooded the capital with lavish feasts that groaned under mountains of meat and wine, then roared back with merciless purges that silenced dissent in rivers of blood. By spring of 190, a coalition of alarmed warlords formed, a ragtag pageant of banners fluttering against storm clouds. Yuan Shao, the eastern lord whose lineage boasted more branches than an ancient oak, took center stage, his standard snapping in the wind as though victory were already his. Yet the alliance was a carnival of self-importance, each prince more intent on dazzling the audience than confronting the tyrant before them. Amid this circus strode Sun Jian, a southern champion with the feral spirit of a cornered tiger. Clad in sweat-darkened armor, he cut a swath through Dong's forces and unearthed, in the smouldering ruins of the capital, a jade seal said to bear heaven's decree. Rather than present it to the puppet emperor, he concealed it in his saddlebag, envisioning his own purple-robed ascension. It was a fatal flourish. Ambition painted a bullseye on his back, and by 191, an enemy arrow ended his campaign in a spray of red against green pines. His sons inherited the seal along with its curses, a poisoned heirloom in a land where even blessed relics run dry. Yuan Shao's cousin, Yuan Shu, dealt an even recklessly grander hand. By 197, he proclaimed himself Emperor of Huaisong, brandishing that very jade seal as proof of divine favor. His coronation glittered like a midsummer sunrise, golden robes, trumpets echoing through marble halls, but his coffers lay bare. His troops, gaunt and unpaid, melted away like morning mist. Torrential rains drowned his harvests, and bandits ravaged his camps under starless skies. By 199, His throne was a ruin, and he died choking on his own ambition, the Jade Seal no more than a weathered trinket beneath the tomb's earth. The chronicles record no tears for him. In the pitiless ledger of history, his unreadiness was his undoing. In the north, Gongsun rode into battle with cavalry as white as driven snow, their horses thunder like an oncoming storm. At Jieqiao in 191, he smashed into Yuan Shao's ranks, arrows hissing through the dawn haze like hornets unleashed. For a heartbeat, victory gleamed at his fingertips, until sheer numbers ground him to a halt. By 199, his hilltop stronghold was a charred skeleton, and the warlord chose death over dishonor, his final breath carried off by bitter winds. His horses remained the stuff of legend, his strategy a cautionary tale. A swift steed can carry you far, but it won't outpace poor judgment. Not all power lay in steel. Wang Yun, a court minister whose robes swept the marble floors like drifting petals, proved that cunning words could carve deeper wounds than any sword. After Dong Zhuo's tyrannical binge left the capital a slaughterhouse, Wang spun a trap of jealousy and desire, setting beauty against blood ties to ensnare the despot. When Dong fell, Wang basked in triumph, brief warmth before the winter's chill. His victory sparked vengeance, and in a reign of assassins, he paid the final price. His head rolled, his brilliance buried under the rubble of a city he'd hoped to save. Further south, Liu Bei crowned himself a scholar lord amid jade pagodas and bamboo groves, his halls scented with incense and lined with scrolls. He hosted poets beneath moonlit verandas, while his heirs whispered ambitions in shadowed corners. His neutrality became his shackle. In 208, as northern armies thundered toward his gates, he offered no defense. His heart gave out. Some say from sorrow, others from shame. His province slipped away, and his legacy lay forgotten in dusty manuscripts, a gentle soul crushed between the weight of armies and the indifference of fate. Alliances in this age were wagers cast on shifting sands. Oaths sworn in wine turned to daggers hidden under tables. Yuan Shao's 190 coalition was the era's emblem of folly. 18 lords, each clasping his own prize, stumbling before they ever swung a sword. Sun Quan's kin tried pacts with northern barons, only to see covenants dissolve in mutual suspicion. One opportunist, Zhang Yang, sent gifts to every camp, balancing on the knife edge between loyalties, until 198, when his own men slit his throat, proving loyalty was a currency nobody honored twice. Amid the clash of steel, merchants and spies often played the sharpest hands. Mi Zhu, a silver-tongued trader, bankrolled armies with caravan fortunes, slipping past imperial levies with the grace of a drifting cloud. His sister's marriage to a warlord bound wealth to influence in a knot tighter than any oath. Spies like Chen Gong flitted between masters, their whispered secrets tipping battle after battle. In a world of clanging aluminum and cracking whips, the quill and the purse held more sway than 1,000 blades. These deadly games weren't simply about conquest. They were tests of endurance, each warlord striving to outlive his own catastrophic fall. Yuan Shu's hollow crown, Gongsun Zan's ghostly cavalry, Liu Biao's forgotten scrolls, all collapsed beneath the weight of overweening pride. The chronicles savor these missteps, painting them as men who reached for the heavens only to clutch handfuls of dust. A delicious irony. The louder you herald your fate, the faster it escapes you. And so these lesser lords, cast in the shadows of the great, set the stage for the bloodiest dramas of the Three Kingdoms, where the stories behind the stories carried the true pulse of an age undone by ambition. Battles beyond the legends. The air of the Three Kingdoms era pulsed with the clang of steel and the roar of ambition. Warlords strutted through dust-choked camps, their jeweled helmets catching a harsh sun, while below them commoners scrambled through fields and markets, hearts pounding as hard as the drums that heralded every skirmish. Beyond polished tales of heroism lay muddy plains, strewn with shattered spears, rivers heavy with burning warships, and commanders shouting tactics that dissolved into panic the moment arrows shattered the calm. From the late 1800s to the 2080s, the collapse of the Han Dynasty ignited a century of desperate gambits, battles not merely for territory but for pride, survival, the flicker of hope that a single reckless bet might crown you emperor. Here, lesser-known generals, cunning spies, and sheer unpredictable fortune upended the mightiest armies. It was chaos with a purpose, a grand, messy brawl where brilliance and blunder met on blood-spattered ground. The Yellow Turban Rebellion of 184 burst forth like a conflagration. Peasants draped in saffron scarves trampled the cracked earth, their torches carving long shadows across farmland. Zhang Jue, voice booming like a thunderclap, galvanized starving families with promises of a heavenly mandate. They overran frontier outposts, ramshackle wooden palisades splintering under their pitchforks, while the imperial courtiers huddled in the lacquered halls of Luoyang, stunned into silence. He Jin, the emperor's burly brother-in-law, mustered a ragged coalition of warlords and descended on the rebels at Guangzong. Arrows hissed through the dawn mist, ripping through Taoist banners and chanting voices, turning the camp into a slaughterhouse dripping pink dawnlight. Zhang Jue fell, some say by blade, others by fever. But even his death couldn't snuff the rebellion's spark. Villages lay empty, fields churned to mud, and the court's coffers lay hollow, a grim reminder that revolts born in the dirt could drain an empire. By 190, the Han was a hollow husk. When Zhang Jue transformed the capital into his personal feast, marble halls stained crimson with wine and blood, an uneasy alliance of warlords pledged to rescue the young emperor Xian. Yuan Shao paraded his banners like a peacock, but at Hulao Pass, his grand army faced Dong's disciplined legions instead of the triumph they'd dreamed of. Sun Jian, the southern tiger, launched himself through the enemy lines, his blade singing until a stray arrow silenced him in the swirling dust. Meanwhile, Yuan Shao's lieutenants squabbled around campfires, embers dancing on their dripping standards. By dawn, Dong's troops had slipped away under a canopy of smoke, torches igniting the capital in a scorched earth denial. The victors stood amid smouldering ruins, no throne to claim, while peasants swept ashes into baskets, proof that even a united front could collapse into petty greed. In 191, the Battle of Jiaqiao pitched Yuan Shao's foot soldiers against Gongsun Zan's famed white horse cavalry on a spreading plain drenched by autumn rains. Gongsun's chargers thundered in tight formations, arrows screaming like hornets, scything through Yuan's ranks until mud and blood slowed their flanks. Shivering in soggy armor, Yuan's archers found their mark. Volleys of iron feathers turned the tide, and Gongsun Zan, his legendary riders mired in clay, beat a hasty retreat. His retreat saw the torch set to his own fortress in 1999, an ignoble end to once vaunted glory. Jiaqiao smacked of stubborn pride meeting implacable grit, where speed faltered before sheer numbers. Yiling in 222 became a fire-lit spectacle no strategist could have scripted better. Sun Quan's southern legions, under the calm eye of Lu Xun, lured the invading Shu troops into a labyrinth of brush and wooden palisades along the riverbank. As twilight crept in, hidden archers let fly fire-tipped arrows that turned dry brush to roaring flame. The forest canopy glowed orange, embers dancing on the water's surface as Shu soldiers scrambled in terror, their cries swallowed by crackling trunks. By dawn, the river bore drifting bundles of charred tents, and the once proud army was little more than ash motors and broken dreams. Quiet Lu Xun watched the blaze like a scholar admiring calligraphy, proof that a patient mind could outshine a brash sword arm. In 215, the siege of Hefei showcased the power of audacious defense. Zhang Liao, a veteran commander under Wei, held a near-empty garrison atop crumbling walls, lanterns flickering in morning fog. When Sun Quan's forces massed below, Zhang organized a pre-dawn sortie. Riders thundered from the gates like a sudden storm, cleaving tents into kindling and scattering southern soldiers into their tangled spears. Helmets flew, panicked shouts echoed across the river. Sun Quan, his banner tossed, abandoned the siege in a breathless retreat toward waiting boats. Zhang Liao's tiny band, drenched in triumph, transformed a handful of defenders into living legend, emblematic of a dynasty built on guts and guile. Behind every pitched fight lurked the silent hands of spies and scouts. Zhu Shou, Yuan Shao's keenest advisor, huddled over ink-dark maps by oil lamp, warning of a flank that Yuan ignored. Chen Gong drifted between warlord courts like a restless wind, whispering half-truths that swayed campaign plans. A nameless merchant in Wu's ranks infiltrated Hefei with forged edicts, sowed confusion, and vanished before Zhang Liao's raid struck. These shadow operators never raised swords, yet their stolen letters and whispered intelligence guided whole armies, slaying or sparing thousands with a single secret. Hulao's posturing, Jieqiao's mud-choked fields, Yiling's inferno, Hefei's lightning strike. Each battle became a jagged stroke in the age's grand tapestry, where raw desperation met daring brilliance. Chronicles may lionize the great names, Lu Xun, Zhang Liao, but the real fire that forged the three kingdoms sprang from humble scouts, a single spark, a misjudged command. As banners fell and trophies clanged on scorched earth, a new culture of poetry, faith, and art was born from the crucible of war, weaving the next thread in a legendary era. Culture in crisis. Across the battlefields of the Three Kingdoms era, Hulao's thunderous parades of banners, Jieqiao's rain-slick mud that sucked at every boot, Yiling's roaring inferno that turned forests to charcoal, the earth bore the wounds of relentless conflict. Yet beyond the clashing swords and cracking shields, the era's true soul shimmered in hidden glades and candlelit rooms. While warlords carved out kingdoms with steel and blood, poets, priests, and artisans spun a fragile tapestry of art and belief that glowed amid the ash. In the romance of the Three Kingdoms, the late 180 to 280 did more than fuel endless campaigns. It poured forth ink, hymn, and invention into the fissures of a dying Han Dynasty. Imagine villages redolent of incense and rain, Taoist mystics chanting beneath weathered pavilions, jade trinkets gleaming like pale moons in hastily abandoned camps. Survival meant more than dodging spears. It meant discovering beauty in the very wreckage of life. Perhaps the greatest paradox of all, the darkest days sparked the most incandescent sparks of creativity, as though the shadow of war demanded new light to prove it wrong. Poetry bloomed like a stubborn lotus in the mire. The Jian'an poets, so named for the Han's twilight years, conjured verses that rang with sorrow sharper than any blade's edge. By flickering lamplight, Wang Kan dipped his brush into thick indigo ink, each stroke trembling with raw honesty. His words mourned charred fields and scattered kin, yet tasted sweetness in simple wonders. A lone white crane drifting over ruined rooftops, the hush of moonlight touching weary travelers. He drifted through shattered hamlets, slipping past bandits under starless skies to scribble lines that became lifelines for despairing souls. Chen Lin, a retainer poet bound to warlords by duty, penned scathing mockeries of ambition's vanity. After a crushing defeat, he wrote of soldiers laid low beneath blossoming peach trees, a testament to life's stubborn insistence on return. These poems were more than decoration on paper. They were acts of defiance, proof that ink could endure where iron rusted. A wry jest indeed. Warriors fell on the battlefield, yet poets paused to craft odes, as if death would wait for the final rhyme. Through the chaos, Taoism wove streaks of otherworldly hope. The Yellow Turban Uprising, ignited by Zhang Jue's healing chants and promises of a tax-free paradise, may have shattered in 185, but its faith rippled outward. Taoist priests drifted from village to village, blending genuine healing salves with showman's flourishes. Zuo Ci, the wandering magician, became a legend. He escaped iron shackles as though they were made of mist, conjured steaming dumplings from empty baskets, or so the whispers claimed. Peasants pressed golden wheat into his palms in exchange for talismans said to ward off bandits or cure fevers. Whether sleight of hand or true sorcery, his performances offered terrified communities a shard of wonder to cling to. Another figure, the priest Yu Ji, tangled with southern warlords, his curses rumoured to topple armies from within. When a general finally executed him, ghost stories leapt like wildfire. Soldiers claimed his restless spirit slid through camp tents, sowing panic deeper than any cavalry charge. The official scrolls remain skeptical, but they delight in every whispered rumour. A sly twist of fate. In a world overrun by iron and blood, a soft-spoken curse could do more harm than 1,000 spears. Artistry too flourished, despite, or perhaps because of, the fires. Calligraphers such as Zhong Yao transformed rice paper into living rivers of black ink, their broad, fluid characters dancing across pale sheets like drifting willow branches. By day, he served as court scribe, crafting warlords' decrees. By night, he coaxed poems from the same brush, each stroke carrying the weight of a descending dynasty. Temples and hidden libraries sheltered his work through raids, proof that beauty could survive amid ruin. Meanwhile, jade carvers laboured in dim workshops, coaxing symbols of peace from stone harder than warlords' resolve. One anonymous artisan etched a slender crane onto the hilt of a general's dagger, a silent plea for tranquility in a hand built to spill blood. These carvings weren't mere luxury items, but bold declarations. Heaven's favour could be invoked where common weapons failed. Chronicles record warlords hoarding such treasures, as though pale green jade might purchase the very loyalties that steel could not. A grim irony, sculpting elegance while cities burned, akin to polishing pearls atop a sinking ship. Women, too, shaped the currents of culture. Lady Wu, matriarch of Sun Quan's southern court, wielded influence with silken letters that stilled bickering ministers and redirected the tides of policy. She lavished patronage on poets and priests, ensuring their voices reached beyond the din of mustered armies. Her daughter, Lady Sun, sealed peace through marriage, her bridal dowry brimming with scrolls of Taoist wisdom to temper her new lord's ambitions. These women were never mere shadows behind thrones, but living threads in the era's tapestry, sowing stability wherever men sowed discord. Then there was Kai Yan, the captive poetess, torn from her homeland by roving steppe riders. In exile's gloom, she wrote of homeland's longing and distant stars, her tears inked onto fragile bamboo slips. Merchants smuggled her verses back along trade routes, her sorrow becoming the bulwark of shared humanity. Though official records spare few lines for her, her words outlived sieges and declared, in an age of thunderous proclamations, a woman's whisper could travel farther than any trumpet. This blossoming of culture was not the exclusive claim of elites. In smoky village squares, itinerant storytellers spun epic sagas of fallen heroes, their voices rising over the drum of passing armies. One favourite tale told of a clever farmer who faked a plague to outwit a ravenous tax collector. Villagers roared with laughter despite gnawing hunger. Primitive Taoist charms, scrawled on vermilion paper and pinned to doorframes, promised protection from looters. Whether by true magic or shared conviction, they offered a flicker of security. Even children etched crude images of cranes and spear-bearing warriors into barn walls, their childish artistry rebelling against despair. Culture here was not extravagance, but survival. A bold declaration that we endure even as the world seemed rent asunder. A final paradox: the more the land was set aflame, the more fiercely its ideas glowed. These creations, poems inked in candlelight, charms scribbled in dust, carvings hewn from jade, would outlast the roar of catapults and the clamour of conquest. Wang Kan's lines found their way into imperial anthologies centuries later, read by scholars in silent studies long after warlords had grown cold in their tombs. Zhong Yao's calligraphy set the standard for generations of brushmasters, his flowing strokes preserved in temple scrolls, a reminder that elegance can spring from chaos. Taoist faith, ignited by Zhang Jue's uprising, deepened into a living tradition that still hums in shrine bells today. Cai Yan's exilic poetry became an anthem for the dispirited, her verses replicated in courts and cottages alike. Chroniclers delight in this resilience. Warlords may have traded fortunes for battles, but it was culture that carried the true reward. A sardonic truth emerges. Swords may rust and shields shatter, but a poet's quill endures, cutting deeper than any blade. In the end, the culture of the Three Kingdoms was no mere backdrop to war. It was its mirror, reflecting both devastation and determination. Poets like Wang Kan gave voice to the broken. Mystics like Zuo Ci sold dreams to the despairing. Artisans like Zhong Yao coaxed beauty from ash. From crisis arose creation, and this luminous web of poetry, faith, and art became the era's lasting testament. As the smoke of battle cleared, those fragile threads wove themselves into the pages of history, a soft yet unyielding echo of hope in a world defined by conflict.